Tens of thousands of high-tech workers are without jobs, and the prospects for them don't look very good, especially when you consider a certain immigration program, which, as some claim, has flooded the job market with foreign workers. Stephen Cooper has a first look at his problem-solver investigation.
What if I told you when you go to work tomorrow, there'll be someone there to take your job? What if I told you that you'll have to train that person to do your job? Sounds rather far-fetched, don't you think? Well, it isn't.
This isn't a layoff, it's a replacement, which, I feel betrayed by the company. I mean, I gave them 15 good, loyal years.
Americans across the country, hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost their jobs and can't get work.
Mike Emmons and James Granberry were working at Siemens in Lake Mary, and they both claim the company has replaced them with cheaper foreign labor. There are two types of visas, H-1b and L-1, that allow foreigners to come here and work in specialized fields like computer programming and software engineering. Our research shows that thousands of these foreigners came into the U.S. to take jobs at many of the same companies that were laying off tens of thousands of American workers.
These people are putting Americans out of work.
And I worked with the largest companies in this country, AT&T, American Express, First Data.
And no one wants you back?
No.
Oh, I think I'm out of the IT business for good, in my opinion. I'm done.
The foreign IT workers are coming largely from one country half a world away. Is it a wave, a trend, or is it an abuse of the visa program? We take these questions to Capitol Hill. My special report starts Monday night at 11.
Stephen Cooper's at 11, voted Florida's best newscast.
Tonight, a deadly stampede in a nightclub, and the shocking reason it didn't have to happen. Good evening, I'm Lauren Perkins.
And I'm Bob Fryer. We're going to get to that story in just a moment, but first, a problem solver's investigation with international impact. And the secret corporate America doesn't want you to know. Tonight, laid-off workers break their silence about a wave of foreign workers who are now taking jobs at local companies. Stephen Cooper joins us with the exclusive.
Well, like many of you, I suspect, we had no idea this was going on, but then we heard from some people right here in Central Florida who told us they were victimized by an immigration program which they contend has sold out the American worker. The ramifications to our community, our economy, our security may be more than anyone is willing to admit. But just look at one industry, information technology, or IT as it is known, and do the math.
My name is James Granberry, and I work for Siemens ICN in Lake Mary, Florida.
Well, maybe not for long. You see, James Granberry is one of a growing number of information technology workers, either laid off or on the verge of a layoff. Hundreds of thousands of IT workers from dozens of companies in the U.S. have been shown the door over the past few years. The economy, you figure, high tech at rock bottom, the internet bust, or, as James would say, none of the above.
This isn't a layoff, it's a replacement, which, I feel betrayed by the company. I mean, I gave them 15 good, loyal years.
That's right. James' job isn't disappearing, only he is. Others have come in to replace him, and that, his colleague Mike Emmons says, is not the only insult added to the injury.
They brought the employees into a room and told them what was going to happen and told them that they had to train them. And they held a carrot out in front of them, a severance, and said, if you don't stay around and train them, you're not going to get your severance.
So they, up front, told you that you're not just being laid off, but you're being replaced by other labor?
Yes, I was given a list of objectives, and one of my objectives was to train my replacements.
So who exactly are these replacements? Well, they sure have had a heck of a commute. This is New Delhi. Perhaps one of the biggest exports from India these days is people, specifically people in the IT industry.
These people are putting Americans out of work.
To understand how or if this is happening, you have to understand a little something about visas. Indian IT workers are coming here by the thousands, either on a visa called H-1b or L-1. H-1b visas allow U.S. companies, including federal contractors, to hire skilled foreign workers on a temporary basis, ostensibly to supply foreign workers where they cannot find qualified Americans.
The H-1Bs are allowed to come over and work, but they're not supposed to displace Americans.
But Mike insists that's what's happening. In fact, he says he trained several Indians to do his job.
They're taking jobs, 20 of us in Siemens that are losing our jobs right now.
It's kind of a slap in the face.
Until the year 2000, the number of H-1B visas granted per year was limited to 65,000. But then Congress voted to raise the cap to 195,000.
Every night I go to bed and I would think about what our Congress has done to Americans. I go to bed and I say, my God, I can't believe that they've turned on us like this.
The question is, why did Congress raise the H-1B cap? Well, back in the mid to late 90s, there was a strong lobbying effort, in part by the Information Technology Association of America. That organization did a survey of the job market and concluded there was a huge shortage of qualified IT workers. The survey showed a shortage by the thousands, and that survey was used to convince Congress to raise the cap, which resulted in a wave of foreign worker immigration.
We have heard story after story of people who say that these people aren't coming to fill new jobs or new vacancies. They're coming to replace us. In fact, we're having to train them to do our jobs.
I can't respond to every individual situation. I get those emails too from individuals. I'm sure they're frustrated.
I believe it's fraud from the ITAA.
Whatever numbers the ITAA used to convince Congress to raise the cap, just look at this list and one thing's for sure. Companies like these that were laying off thousands of workers into 2001 were, at the same time, hiring hundreds of H-1B workers from overseas.
It all goes back to, corporate citizenship that doesn't exist today. I mean, that's why the Enrons and the WorldComs did what they did.
This is the response from Siemens. The company does not deny any of the issues raised in this story. Siemens has disclosed that it does in fact contract work out to a consultancy service in India, which brings workers here to fill certain jobs. The company says it has taken these actions to operate the IT function of its business more efficiently. Siemens also says it has so far helped 5 of the affected employees find other comparable positions in the company. Now, while the company does distinguish between full-time employees and contractors, we should point out that these American contractors say they've just been replaced by other contractors who happen to be foreigners.
Exactly. All right, well, it sounds like we're just getting started here. We've got more, of course, for tomorrow night as well.
Well, tomorrow night we'll talk more about the L1 visa and its ramifications for our workforce here. And the story's still developing as we go to Capitol Hill and ask Congress to answer some questions about this.
And you're getting a lot of response from viewers as well.
From all over the country.
Exactly. All right, Stephen, thank you. Lauren? Well, the high-tech companies, they call it outsourcing. They hire an outside consultant who in turn supplies them with contract workers.
Those contractors generally don't get benefits, a huge savings for the corporations who use them, like American Express, Siemens, and Disney. But there's an international twist to this story. Stephen Cooper joins us with more. Stephen.
From Silicon Valley to right here in Central Florida, countless workers are losing their jobs to outsource contractors. The shock is those contractors are in large numbers foreign workers replacing Americans. How do we know this? We've heard from dozens of American workers who say their jobs went to foreigners. This stack is just a sample. Russell Adams was laid off after 23 years at Siemens ICN in Lake Mary. Mike Emmons was let go too. James Granberry is on the verge of losing his job. They all say they're victims of a system that favors cheap foreign labor that allows foreigners to come here and displace American workers.
It's been 7 or 8 months since I've been laid off, so I try not to worry about it. I've had to take a little bit of money out of my 401k to help out with bills lately.
The H-1B and L-1 visa issue has become a contentious one. H-1Bs allow American companies to bring foreign workers here if they presumably can't find qualified Americans. The L-1 visa is a bit more insidious, if you will. It's granted for intra-company transfers. Look at it this way. A consulting company we'll call Acme in, let's say, India, hires hundreds of computer programmers and software engineers. Acme sets up an office in the U.S. and is able to, with the L-1 visa, transfer all those workers here. But guess what? Those workers aren't really working at an Acme facility. Instead, they're farmed out to companies like American Express, Bank of America, Siemens. It's really happening. And that is how these laid-off workers claim they lost their jobs.
They call it, you're laid off and we're outsourcing. That's just weasel words.
I don't mean to sound like a racist or whatever, but the fact is, they're Indians replacing us.
Corporate America may call it outsourcing, but many of these so-called outsourcing companies are foreign-owned and are bringing in foreign workers under the L1 transfer. Such is the case with TCS, Tata Consulting Services, an India-based outsourced vendor. In fact, we studied the numbers and found that more L1 and H-1b visa holders come from India than from anywhere else.
It was kind of funny. They led up to, not funny, it was kind of disgusting actually. They led up to, outsourcing is the wave of the future, and you just got to deal with what's happening. They were passing the buck instead of saying, we're using cheap labor.
All of this is happening under the nose of Congress, which in the year 2000 voted to increase the number of H-1Bs allowed into the U.S. The legislators we spoke to say Congress was persuaded in the mid-90s by corporate America to open the door to more foreign workers.
The source of the information was excellent. It was documented. There was a need for the workers. And this industry was expanding beyond anything what we had seen. So you didn't want a close down of that industry.
But the laid-off workers say the IT industry gave bogus information to Congress, all in the quest for cheap labor. The government is now investigating.
To close down these mills that are bringing people in outside the parameters of the law on a contract basis. That wasn't the intent of the law, and it may be a gap in the law that needs to be closed.
Did I think that at times American business has violated the spirit, if not the letter of the law? Of course.
Well, very specifically, Tata and other companies that I've been made aware of that are violating both the intent and the purpose of the law, I've asked for investigations of those companies.
If it's displacement of American workers, it's against the law.
Representative Micah, who has ordered an investigation into this issue, as he said, voted against the Watt Amendment in 1998, which would have forbidden U.S. firms from using temporary workers to replace Americans. Micah also voted for a bill that increased the number of foreign workers allowed into the U.S. However, he says he voted this way after the industry convinced Congress there was a critical shortage of IT workers. We'll have more tonight at 11. In fact, a new issue emerges. Beyond foreigners taking American jobs here, many of these companies are shipping the work offshore, which of course poses some interesting questions about our economy, your privacy, and our overall security.
Right. So many bills, so many congressmen, so many lobbyists, and everybody has their own story to sell. It's tough to decide which one is true and which one's right.
You go to Washington, D.C., and you get an earful.
I bet.
Micah called him a mill. I think that was pretty apropos. We'll hear from you tonight. All right, Kim, thanks. Our other big story tonight, foreign workers brought in to replace local employees.
Tonight, the problem solvers investigate disappearing jobs. A growing number of American workers say corporate America is putting profits before people. Stephen Cooper joins us now. It's been only 24 hours since your first story and already a huge response from all over the country, Stephen.
Absolutely, from coast to coast. But when you talk about foreign workers coming to the U.S. and taking jobs, you have to ask, are they displacing American workers? But when you raise this question, you risk being labeled a racist. Those American workers, however, who say they've been displaced are not angry with the foreigners. They're angry at corporate America and, to some extent, Congress. They came to tell a story. They came as a group. Safety in numbers. Camaraderie meets commiseration. First, a show of hands of those who've been laid off.
Well, I've been out of work since November. My wife took a full-time job so we can have benefits, and I'm missed a month.
Next, a show of hands of those laid off who were replaced by foreign workers.
I've been out of work since April of last year, and I have totally exhausted all of my unemployment benefits at this point. So I'm living basically at the sole discretion and generosity of my friends and my family.
Finally, a show of hands of those who had to train their replacements.
They laid me off, and a week later I found out that those two guys who had a training with me, who had less experience than I had it, they went to work to that place.
I was told that if I don't cooperate in training the offshore, that they'll let me go right on the spot.
And lest we forget, some of our guests are in the dark, fearing retribution if they speak out against corporate America.
You feel that there is a veil of intimidation?
Yes, there is.
No veil.
No veil.
There's no veil. It's just intimidation.
Gloves are off.
We would not be having this meeting if it weren't for these two types of visas that allow foreign workers to come to the U.S. for up to 6 years to fill highly skilled, specialized positions. And now we have a growing number of American workers, particularly information technology workers, who say the foreigners have not come to fill new jobs. They've come to fill their jobs, displacing them out of work. Most of the people in this meeting have between 20 and 30 years in the IT industry.
We're not trying to say that those jobs belongs to us because we are just American and we are legal right here. What we're trying to say is, hey, we have a right to compete.
But they say they can't compete with what they claim is cheap foreign labor.
Oh, I think I'm out of the IT business for good, in my opinion. I'm done.
I've heard people say, you know what, you have a bunch of middle-aged white guys complaining about foreigners. Now, I'm looking around the room here, and you don't all look white to me. Am I mistaken? I mean, this is a melting pot of workers. This is not a racial issue.
It's not a racial issue. And we also don't have any hatred for the Indians. We really don't, because they have a right to work just like we do. All we really want is a fair and equal way of going after a job.
The IT industry insists that the foreigners are here because there was such a huge shortage of qualified IT workers in the mid-90s.
I am more than adequately trained. That's baloney.
We let the group listen to a few comments from an industry spokesperson.
Clearly those people who, when the music stops in the musical chairs game, end up without a seat, they've got to lash out at somebody. Where they're not going to blame themselves, of course, if they're for not having current skills or for not being flexible enough in their working environment. They have to lash out at somebody, so they're going to lash out at foreign workers.
He says you're just not skilled enough, and you're taking it out on the foreigners.
It's not that we don't have the skills required to do the job. We do, and in most cases we can do the job in half to 25% of the time it takes these other people to do it.
Those who simply come in and say, well, I made $150,000 last year, I need to make $150,000 this year, I haven't upgraded my skill sets, but I don't think I should lose a job to a foreign worker, are totally missing the point.
It has nothing to do with skills. It's the bottom line. I'm sure of that.
Well, according to two Florida congressmen, the H-1b and L-1 visa issue is now under investigation by the General Accounting Office and the Department of Justice. But there is another issue beyond the foreign workers who come here. In just minutes, in this same newscast, I'll be back to tell you about the work U.S. companies are sending overseas and how some of your most private information is going along with it. Trust me, you probably won't like what you see. Some surprises just minutes away. Stay right here. Lauren?
All right. Now more of our problems.